Welcome to Your Mac Life for Wednesday, February the 24th, 2016, show number 1081. Thank you guys very much for joining me here this Wednesday evening or in the archive, however you guys choose to tune into the show. I appreciate it regardless. As always, send us emails to onair@yourmaclifeshow.com if you want to have stuff on the show live, or just during the week, Shawn at yourmaclifeshow.com. On tonight's show, we'll talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop, loopinsight.com, more about the FBI and Apple and the PR campaigns going on this evening at 6:30 Eastern time. Some of you probably already saw it. Tim Cook was on ABC News talking about the issue. I haven't had a chance to see the video yet, so I don't know what he said. We see that other aspects of this are being played out in the media, not yet in the courts, but it will eventually make it to the courts, and that's where it will eventually be decided. You may have read stories about a Pew Research study that was wildly taken out of context by almost everybody. So the media war has started, and will continue over this as we go forward. We'll talk to Jim about that. Also a bunch of other stuff, too. And our good friend Captain Ron Klutz of Google, he works at Google, and is the official pilot of Your Mac Life. I don't think any other podcast has an official pilot. I think we're the only one. Was asking about iOS photo editors, and we'll talk about that on our starting point photography segment. As always, we encourage you to subscribe to Your Mac Life. You go to the website, yourmaclifeshow.com, right there on the left-hand side. This is my left hand. Left-hand side, you can subscribe for $2, $5, $10, $15 a month, whatever it is. It helps support the show if that's how you so choose. You'll notice we don't have any advertising on this. This show is 100% listener supported, so I appreciate you guys if you would support the show. I've been thinking about doing another podcast. I'm trying to think of another reason to do a podcast. I got a couple of people who are interested in doing that. We can't figure out a subject matter that isn't beat to death by everybody. I don't know if I want it just to be another technology show or what it's going to be, but I'm trying to think of something doing other stuff. Made possible by listeners like you. Speaking of which, don't forget our friend DJ McIntosh has created his own our Apple TV app for Your Mac Life. You can watch it live or the archives. You have to do a search on the Apple TV App Store. I don't have an Apple TV, a new one, so I don't know. Search on the App Store, and you'll come up with, do a search for Your Mac Life, 99 cents. All the money goes to DJ, so do it. 99 cents. Don't be cheap. Support DJ. Buy the app. It's simple. It's easy. What was the story? Oh, and the other thing is I've been testing out this app called Telegram. We can see, I'll show you guys. For those folks, this is a really weird thing. There's only about 10%, not even 10% of folks who are watching the show at any given time are participating in the show in the IRC, if you're tuned in live. And like we always say, that's half the fun of the show is the IRC chat room. So there's this new app, not new, it's got 100 million users, this new cross-platform app. And on its own, it's kind of cool. It's a cross-platform chat app or messaging app. So it works on Android, works on Windows, works on your iOS devices, on your Mac, on your desktop, on your Windows machine. And it all ties in together. And so you can do chat no matter what kind of device the other person has. Like I avoid doing text messages to people who don't have iPhones because it costs me money. So I won't text them. I'll email them. So what you can do with this app is text anybody you want, company-wide. And what I've done here is I've set up a Your Mac Life group on this. And I like this app not more than IRC. IRC is very simple, and that's a good thing. It can be a little confusing to get into, and it turns out Telegram might be too for some of us. But it looks like it's got some neat features to it. For example, you can quote easily. So here's Lauren, and I can right-click and then click on this, and then text Lauren. And you see how it's formatted? That doesn't work that way in IRC. I like the formatting of this much, much better. Images show up in line. So if somebody posts an image, someone in the Telegram room, just drag and drop an image onto your chat window. So I can show the audience how images pop up. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of there you go. You see, and so there's the image. It just pops up that quickly. So it's kind of neat. I like it. And these things are popping up on my iPhone at the same time as they're happening on the. I'm using the Mac OS 10 app, but it's also available on the desktop. So I'm going to leave this open too. This is going to be a chat. Lauren says, "Don't tell the choir director. He's at choir tonight, and he's texting us." Lauren, send us a picture of the choir director. So I'm going to leave this open during the week. And for you folks who are tuned into the archive, you go to telegram.org and sign in, and then just do a search for Your Mac Life and it should pop up, or do a search for Shawn King and it should pop up, and you can join me during the week if you so choose. Just trying stuff out, just trying to find different ways to engage the audience, trying to get more people involved in the live show in a more overt way instead of being passive. And I like the back and forth that we've always had during the IRC chat rooms. You guys back and forth to me, you guys back and forth to each other. I think it's a really neat element of the show, and I want to see if we can't make that even bigger and better going forward. I'm going to talk to Jim about this, but I also want to get your thoughts on this stuff too. VR. Does virtual reality appeal to any of you guys? I was thinking about this because one of the problems that I personally have is I get too involved in this stuff. I live it. I think it too much. And I forget that normal people don't understand this. I was having a conversation with my friend Donna on iMessage, and I mentioned something about Tumblr. She said, "What's Tumblr?" I said, "Oh my God, you don't know what Tumblr is?" She said, "No, I don't know what Tumblr is." And she's a professional woman. She has a real job, an intense, busy job, but she's also got kids. She's got a teenager and a tween. You better know what Tumblr is. You better find out what Tumblr is. She's not on Twitter. She's not familiar with Twitter. She was asking some of her coworkers about Tumblr, and none of them had heard of it. Asking about Twitter, and some of them had heard of it, but didn't know actually what it was. And I'm sure the same thing is happening with VR and AR. There's a certain class of people who are talking about this stuff, maybe promoting it, but I don't think the average person cares about VR. It's like the average person doesn't care about Twitter. Ask your friends and family and coworkers and those kinds of folks whether they know about these things, whether they know about Tumblr and Twitter and virtual reality goggles and that kind of stuff. I'd be willing to bet the vast majority of folks say no, they may have heard of it, but they don't actually understand what it is. Mosquito says, "I initially dismissed Tumblr while Leo Laporte was still talking about using it." Yeah, I don't have, I have a Tumblr, but only because it's a place to test stuff out. Basically, Tumblr is a way of blogging. And Tumblr has a reputation for having a lot of porn on it, which is why I told my friend Donna, "You better find out about Tumblr, because you are going to have a teenage boy soon." Arxine says, "We're in a virtual reality situation right now. We're virtually gathered into a little real-time get-together." Yeah, Arxine, but you know what I mean. We're talking about the goggles. You guys saw that picture of let me see if I can't find this. That almost disturbing picture of what the hell's his name? Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Arguably one of the richest guys in the world, arguably one of the most important people in the world. And he's walking down the aisles of the Mobile World Congress, and no one saw him because I think it was the Sony or Samsung, one of those two companies, showing off the VR. Everyone had VR goggles on. This is kind of disturbing. This is kind of weird. Yeah, did Ridley Scott direct that? I know, doesn't it feel that way? See, I don't think the average person wants to walk around, wants to be inside virtual reality goggles. Gamers, yes. Nerds, yes. But my friend Donna, no. She's never going to do this. Why? And so you have to be careful when you hear so much hype about these products. Who's hyping them? Well, one of the people that are hyping them are the companies that make these products, that create the content, because they can't sell content if people out there don't have the glasses, don't have the goggles. And the other part of it is just nerds wanting the latest, coolest thing. The media wanting the latest, sexiest thing to talk about. I firmly believe that VR will go the way of 3D TV. That it will be a very tiny niche market. In the case of VR, definitely gamers. And I can see gamers loving this. I can see sitting in my home playing a game with VR goggles on. But I've seen pictures of people in like restaurants, at Starbucks. No, I don't think the average person is going to do that. Into the cloud, the FBI ate them. Yeah. But yeah, it was a really kind of a creepy, freaky thing. And I got to say this. There is no website out there who does more good things followed up by more stupid shit than the people at iMore. They write some really good articles. They write some incredible stupid shit, and this is one of them. They're using the I Stand With Apple hashtag. The people are using to support Apple in their fight against the FBI and their fight against encryption and their fight against invasion of privacy. They're using it for an iPhone contest. You tweet, I stand with, hey iMore, I stand with Apple, and you have a chance to win an iPhone. That is fucking offensive, iMore. That is amazingly inappropriate for you asshats to do that. To appropriate this issue, which is possibly, at least this century, the single most important issue we face, at least in the technology industry, if not the world. And you're using that hashtag to pimp yourself, to promote yourself, to organize a contest to win a frickin' iPhone. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be embarrassed. They're not, and they won't, because they do this kind of stupid shit all the time. Renee Ritchie and everyone else at iMore should be ashamed. Ashamed of their actions with regards to this. And people should be telling them that they should be ashamed of doing this. This is too important to reduce to a marketing stunt. Pisses me off. Richie knows this is a crappy thing to do. He can't stop it. Yes, he can stop it. He most certainly can stop it. Or if he can't stop it, he should distance himself from it. Quit. It's not like you can't get a job somewhere else. That's what you do. You stand up for your principles. You don't just throw your hands in the air and go, oh, well, nothing I can do. Because when you do that, you're acquiescing to the assholes. All right, feel better about that. Thanks very much. Later on the show, we're going to be talking about iOS photo editors. Our good friend, Captain Ron Klutz, the official pilot of Your Mac Life, was asking about iOS editors on Twitter a couple days ago. So in our starting point photography segment, we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com about more of this whole FBI issue. All that and hopefully much, much more coming up. This is Your Mac Life. Welcome back, folks. This is Your Mac Life. I am Shawn King, joined in our phone room by our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. How was your week?
It was a week.
We spent a lot of time, I don't know about you, but I certainly spent a lot of time this past week reading more about this whole FBI Apple thing. Did you learn anything new in the past week?
I learned how much I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding. This is a complicated issue. This is not as simple as he said, she said, or do it or don't. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on. I think one of the best things I read was Ben Thompson over at Stratechery. I don't know how to say it. I linked to it up on loopinsight.com. He did a good job of explaining both sides of the issue because I think to a certain degree the FBI has a point. They do want to be able to. I do believe that they think they're protecting Americans. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that at all. But unfortunately, that is not the only issue.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at what Apple is saying, Apple wants a dialogue on this. Yes. Because it's incredibly important. Once this is done, one way or another, it's done.
Yeah.
You know, especially with the back door. Once that back door is there, it's there. So, you know, ask yourself as a consumer, and I think it was Merlin Man that said this to me today. Would you want a phone and keep all your banking stuff and business stuff on it that you knew wasn't secure?
Yep.
Well, okay, that's a good point. No, not necessarily. I mean, you know, people are always telling us to be careful and to be secure and to do all this stuff. But what difference does it make if there's, a tool out there that will allow people to get into it? Yeah. And I'm not talking about the FBI. I mean, the implication is that once the tool is made, it will get out there because they'll have no control over it. So,
yeah, I find that part of it a little confusing. I understand that this is in a theoretical sense, that once Apple creates this, somehow it'll get out into the world, that someone will hack into their computers and steal it and that kind of stuff. That aspect of the story doesn't really bother me as much because it's so theoretical, because other things that Apple has on their servers, the hackers haven't gotten that. So to me, that's a little too artsy-fartsy for me.
No, but we're not. I don't think that it's only going to be on Apple servers. You know, what if the FBI gets this? And I mean, is Apple when this happens? If you say, okay, well, Apple will have complete control of the tool. Okay, so is Apple now part of a government agency?
Yeah.
And do they work for every government in the world?
Yes, that's a big concern.
Or does Apple give the tool to these governments who we've seen over the years? Governments get hacked all the time.
Yep.
You know, wasn't the Pentagon get hacked, didn't they?
Yep.
I mean, you know, so how much more secure should you be than the Pentagon?
Yep.
And if that happens and this tool does get out there, then what? I mean, you know, chances are the people that steal the tool are going to be looking for credit card information, not, texts and threats from terrorists. Sure. They're going to be looking for cash. So, you know, I think it's reasonable for Apple to ask for some dialogue on this. I really do.
I think we saw in the brief clip that ABC News presented this afternoon that it's really seemed that Tim Cook was a little pissed, if not behind the scenes a lot pissed, that they learned about this through the media. The FBI didn't give even a courtesy call to Apple to say, hey, guys, we have this problem. Can you help us out? They just sort of put this out into the press, and then the press came to Apple for comment, and Apple went, whoa, what the hell are you talking about? That seems to be the wrong way to do it. The other story I saw, too, was that the government has actually enlisted the aid of some of the families of the San Bernardino shooters victims, enlisted them to go to the media and say, no, we think Apple should do this. I find that hugely offensive that the government would ask these family members to get involved in this. Now, they can get involved if they want to on their own, but to have the government go out and say, hey, we really need your help in this PR campaign. Please speak to your local media. Here's some phone numbers of people to call. And because not to diminish their grief and their anguish over this, but that's really pushing a hot button issue that the FBI shouldn't have been doing.
Well, and I can fully understand why the FBI and the government wants the information and why they want all this stuff, and I can fully understand why Apple doesn't want to give it out without some dialogue.
Yeah.
Apple has complied with court orders where they could, but the fact is, there is no way to comply with a court order to give them information that they cannot access. So they are asking for a back door.
Yeah.
And that leads to all kinds of other implications. And to not even be able to discuss that is wrong. And I know that it's difficult, but I really think that in discussing this, we need to leave the hotbed issue alone and say, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Now, clearly the families and those involved aren't going to be able to do that. The government really wants the information on this phone. Maybe they should have gone to Apple before they tried to change the password and everything and screw everything up. There are a lot of things that you can say, well, maybe should have, but this is where we are now, and it's led to a huge debate.
I think that's a good thing too. I think that Apple coming forward with this, with Apple stepping up ahead of everybody else in the industry and saying, no, this is where we're drawing the line in the sand. Apple's okay with any sort of PR that's negative for them. And we've seen that in the past when they don't seem to care about negative PR. Apple's going to do what Apple's going to do. But I think that this dialogue is hugely important. And no matter what side of the issue you're on, I think it's good that we're having this discussion. Hopefully we can have it in a sane, reasonable, rational kind of way, which is not a given. But at least we've started talking about it.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that if we have a discussion in a reasonable way, then we'll be able to make it through this. One way or another, we'll be able to make it through. But I think it's important that we understand the consequences of doing it. We need to understand everything that's going on. And I don't think at this point we do. I think that there are more questions right now than there are answers.
Yes.
And every day there seems to be more questions,
Yep.
I read some of these pieces and I have no idea even, where they're coming up with this. And I read some other ones that, seem very even-sided. I think it's also reasonable to see both sides of this argument. Yeah. You don't have to fall on the government side, or you don't have to fall only on Apple's side. You can see both sides. And I think, any reasonable person would see both sides, but you have to understand the consequences. And I don't think people are considering the consequences. It's a hot button issue, and they're saying, just do it. And, what happens when they are the ones getting hacked by, some nefarious entity out there that wants their credit card information? Then they're going to say, oh, well, look, the iPhone sucks. It's open, and, you can hack into it.
We got a really great question from Wayne, a fellow Nova Scotianer, in the Telegram room and also in the IRC chat room. He said, although I think Apple is taking the right stance, another aspect to consider, do we really want corporations governing public policy? That may set a dangerous precedent as well. How do you respond to Wayne?
Apple is not trying to govern public policy. They're trying to protect its users.
Yeah.
And, I still think that if you look at, let's say that Apple, is able to decrypt this stuff and give it to the government, do you think that the bad guys are going to be using it for long?
Yep.
No. They'll use something else that has encryption in it. And unfortunately, the byproduct of that is that everybody else will be unsafe. I don't see Apple as trying to dictate public policy at all. I mean, the government is trying to dictate to Apple what it can do and what it can't do. And Apple's, at the very heart of it, Apple's just trying to keep its customers' data safe.
I don't see it the same way that Wayne does. That corporations are governing public policy because government governs. The government can always make laws and rules against what the corporations want, and corporations direct government policy in a lot of different ways. We've seen it when it comes to oil regulations and the EPA and that kind of stuff. So that already happens to a certain degree. One of the things that fascinates me about this whole story is one of the great things about America is that it is the land of the free and home of the brave. It is a country full of, lack of a better term, rugged individualists, or that's the myth, anyway, of America. One of the complaints that we Canadians have about America is that it's a country full of people looking out for number one, that the individual is more important than the group. In Canada, we talk about the other way around. The group is more important than the individual. Americans value their individuality and their individual rights over the individuality, over the wants and needs of the group. And yet so many people are ignoring that in this case. This is very much a case, as I think Monty says in the IRC chat room, Big Brother wants it in the name of national security.
Right.
This really feels like a Big Brother kind of thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting, and to quote Merlin again, Merlin said today that he saw a picture on the internet, and it was this group of things. So on one side of the picture was a gun, and on the other side was an iPhone, and it said which one of these actually caused the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
And I chuckled when he when he told me about that, but he's absolutely right.
Yep.
But try and talk to the same people about gun control. They'll lose their mind.
Yeah.
But the iPhone didn't cause this.
No.
And they don't even know that there's any information on the iPhone. And I mean, if you look at it, they destroyed their personal phones.
Yes.
So wouldn't you think that that's where any information would have been?
That's right.
This is a government work phone. I mean, chances are there's nothing in there. So, again, this just leads to more discussion.
Yeah.
And it leads to more questions and answers that I don't believe that we have. I don't believe anybody has.
Mosquito says, the ability to monitor private communications is also often used to eliminate political opposition, not just terrorists and criminals. Keep that in mind, folks, too. We're nowhere near that yet, but it can be argued, the slippery slope of once the government can look into our phones for terrorist activity, they can look into our phones for, quote-unquote, un-American activity, and we don't want that either.
And I mean, you always hear, well, I have nothing to hide.
Yep.
Well, no, it's not about having something to hide. It's more about having something to protect.
Yes.
And your medical data is something you want to protect. Your financial data is something you want to protect. I mean, if the FBI showed up at my door and said, we want to look at your phone, okay, Here you go. But if a hacker shows up at my door and said, hey, can I check out your banking information and your passwords? No. I mean, it's a totally different thing. But if the FBI saw my phone on a table at Starbucks and they could just walk over because they had a key and be able to get into it, and then they lost that key somewhere and the hacker had it, and he could come over and look at my phone. Well, no, I would have an issue with that.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but I don't know. I don't know where this all goes. And that's why I say, we have so many questions and very few
Yeah,
answers.
that's right. And it'll take a long time for this to completely shake out. So we'll be talking about this more in the weeks and months ahead.
And years.
In years, possibly. There was an odd opinion piece on a website, little known website called Mac Kung Fu. It's an opinion piece about the Apple Watch and whether the Apple Watch was useful to this person. And here's the title of it: "The Apple Watch is, well, just a watch." My response to this person on Twitter was, if you think the Apple Watch is just a watch, you're not using it properly. Do you agree with that?
I would have to agree with that only because of my own personal experience with the watch. And this is my personal experience is coming from somebody that went into getting the watch with the attitude of,
Yeah.
I don't know what it will do. I'll try it on and see, and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
And as it turns out, it was, a great thing for me. So I think the one thing that, and I always try and do this in my reviews of anything, music stuff or Apple stuff or whatever the case may be. Here is how I use it. So your mileage may vary depending on how you use it, because you're going to get something completely different out of it than what I'm going to get. And I was at the Silicon Valley Mug meeting.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, great people.
Yep.
And gave a little talk about Apple Watch. And I asked how many people had one, and a few people raised their hands. And I said, well, what do you use it for? And what do you use it for? Everybody had something a little different, So my initial review of the Apple Watch may not have touched any of those people at all. Some people like the notification aspects. People agreed that they're using their phone differently now because they have notifications on the watch. I had the whole fitness aspect of it. There's so many things. And each device is exactly the same. You're going to find that you may use an iPad differently than what I do. I still may love it as much as you do, but we're going to use it differently and we're going to get different things out of it. So, that's the way it's going to be. People are going to read my review and say, I don't use it like that. So that didn't really answer my review. Well, maybe Gruber's will, and that's why you have different people reviewing the same product, because there could be different ways that you use it. I mean, that can happen for anything, any product, iPhone, Mac, radar detector, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could be a fool and be driving 100 miles an hour, and that's why you need a radar detector. Or you could be one of these people that just cruise down the highway and all of a sudden find yourself speeding when you didn't mean to. And then it helps you. So I'm still going to mess with people in self-driving cars. So.
Yeah. Oh, hell yes. That's an absolute given. I think I have no problem with people not liking the Apple Watch for any number of reasons, whether it be price or it's just a gadget or whatever it is. But calling it just a watch to me says you have no clue what the Apple Watch actually is or is meant to be. If you think it's just a watch. Talking about cars and messing with car services, you've taken, I think you like Uber, right?
Oh yeah, I do. I like Uber.
There is a new Uber happening in Bangkok. They just started a new pilot project. Have you heard about this? Uber revs up a motorcycle hailing service. Would you take an Uber motorcycle?
Oh, hell no.
No, I ride a motorcycle. I wouldn't take an Uber motorcycle. That's stupid.
I'll tell you, when I was in Italy, those people, everybody there drove these little mopeds.
Yep.
What are they called?
Vespas.
Yeah. Vespas, yeah. They drive these Vespas. Holy crap. They're crazy. They're crazy. they were weaving in and out of the cars and going. If I got on one of those, I'd be screaming the whole way.
That's right. I can't imagine using a motorcycle Uber. I mean, first of all, motorcycling requires gear. You can just jump into a car in shorts and a T-shirt. You can't do that in a motorcycle. You need helmet and you need gloves and armored stuff because it's a dangerous thing to do. And the second thing is, in a car, if my Uber driver is an idiot and gets to an accident, the airbags come up and I get popped in the face. On a motorcycle, if my Uber motorcycle is an idiot, I could die.
Yeah.
There's no way I would ever. Now, it's interesting, though, the reason behind Uber doing this. Bangkok, during rush hour, the average speed in Bangkok is 6 kilometers an hour of cars. 6 miles per hour of cars. But it's 15 miles an hour of motorcycles and scooters because they're allowed to weave in and out of traffic. So for Bangkok, for most of Southeast Asia, this kind of makes sense from the point of view of those vehicles are allowed to what's called lane splitting or filtering up to the front.
Right.
So you could get places faster than an Uber or a taxi cab or those kinds of issues. It makes a little bit of sense there, but gee.
I don't know if they're allowed to do that in Italy, but they do it.
Yep. Oh, yeah. No, you know what? Everywhere in the world they're allowed to do it except here in North America. California has lane splitting, but it's not legal in California. It's just
Yes, it is.
No, hang on. Let me. I know more about this news. Shut up. It's not legal, but it's not illegal either. It's caught in a gray area where the police can use their discretion of whether or not they can charge you with basically dangerous driving. It's not officially legal, but it's not officially illegal in California either. It's illegal. It's illegal everywhere else, though.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a lot of people don't know. They see people doing it in California, and they assume it's quote unquote legal. But it also depends on how you do it. If you're blowing, and you've seen it, I know you have. If someone's blowing past you on a motorcycle at 60 miles an hour over the speed limit, over traffic, then they're going to pull you over. You can't say, "Oh, but officer, it was legal." They'll definitely arrest you for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand it makes sense. As Wayne points out in the Telegram room, he says being a motorcycle passenger also takes knowledge and skill. That's a good point, Wayne. I don't think a lot of folks realize that. You have to know how to be a passenger, whereas in a car, just sit there. So yeah, I think this is an awful idea.
I mean, on a motorcycle, I know when I had people on the back of my motorcycle, if you don't lean with the driver or with the bike, you're going to screw things up badly.
Yep.
I mean, so yeah, he's right.
What car do you drive now, or sorry, what car is parked underneath the bridge?
I don't really have a car.
Okay, fine. Do you have any interest in Teslas?
Yes and no.
Because we have a lot of them here in Vancouver. I've seen a lot of them more and more all the time, and I'm just curious. I like my motorcycle. I don't need to buy a car, and I can't see the point of a Tesla. But you're a car guy, so
would I buy a Tesla?
Yeah.
No.
Why not?
Because I don't really like the car itself. I find the electronics of the Tesla fascinating.
Yeah.
I find the whole, the inside is basically one big screen on the dashboard and gives you all this information. And I would have fun fooling around with that.
See, I don't want you fooling around with it while you're driving.
I think, no, I would pull over.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I think the autopilot features of these cars are fascinating in one way and very scary in another.
Sure, yeah.
So am I interested in Tesla? Yeah, the same way that I'm interested in Mercedes self-driving cars and those types of things. Yes, I'm interested because of the technology, but I wouldn't buy one. I enjoy driving.
Yeah.
So I read a post, and I forget where it was, but I read a post. A guy got a Mercedes, and it had this vehicle avoidance system or whatever.
Yep.
So he bought this Mercedes. He was driving down the freeway, and all of a sudden it veered left into the next lane because it perceived that there was some kind of a problem. He turned around, drove it back, my money back. Now, and this was the topic of Merwin and I's talk today on my podcast was, do you like technology to the point where it does things for you. So, for instance, a self-driving car. Do you like a self-driving car that would do things for you, or do you like technology that will actually help you complete a task? So another example in the car world would be anti-lock brakes.
Yes.
Anti-lock brakes help you stop more efficiently, stop better. So, there's electronic guitar tuners. There's, all kinds of things that can either do something for you or help you to do something. And, I don't know that I want a car to drive for me. I don't know that I want it to take over. But for these cars, you see them advertised all the time on TV. I have a TV under the bridge, too. Mostly it's just Bob playing puppets in there, you know. But, that you take your eye off the road for a second for whatever reason, you get distracted, and the car will stop for you.
Yep.
That's actually, think of how many accidents that has probably already saved.
Yep.
But it's doing something for you, but is that for the good? You have to think it is if it's going to stop accidents. But, this guy that bought a new Mercedes, the car just veered left on him, and I don't know the details as to why. Maybe it should have veered left. Maybe he was following too close to somebody. Yep. I don't know. But he was very upset with it and wanted nothing to do with it.
It's going to be interesting that this is coming, and it's a matter of how it's going to be coming, how our technology – will the technology outstrip our rights and our obligations and our laws long before we ever get a chance to find out how this stuff works? That's what I'm afraid of. Is that these things are going to be on the road in significant numbers, and then suddenly we're going to go, whoa, wait a minute, we didn't think this through. Let's think this thing through now, folks, as opposed to waiting for whatever period of time and thinking it through.
I agree.
One thing we can definitely agree on is hipsters are stupid. And it's only proven by, I don't know if you saw this today, this Mashable story of the $500 free write word processor. Did you see this?
No.
This is a $500 4-pound device that all it does is type. Doesn't connect to the
typewriter.
Internet. It's a typewriter. It's a 4-pound, $500 typewriter that apparently is selling in droves. Remember the old TRS-80 thing that we had, that we all got from Radio Shack? They had 3 lines of text on it. It was a nightmare to edit, but it was kind of cool because you didn't have to write stuff down on paper. You didn't have to lug your typewriter around. Well, this is something similar to that, except it's $500.
Well, if you want to talk to somebody about typewriters, talk to Matt Gemmell. He has ancient typewriters, new typewriter. He has everything. He's a typewriter collector. So I will not be buying a $500 typewriter.
Well, if it was a $500 typewriter, if this was like an antique typewriter, those I love, those old Cornings with the gigantic, those are beautiful, and they weigh like 40 pounds. These were not portable in any way, shape, or form. My grandfather had one, and I typed school papers on them. Those are kind of cool, but this thing is obscene.
Now you're just lying. You've never done a school paper in your life.
I was a poli-sci major. Are you kidding me? That's all we did was frickin' write. Read and write. It was awful. It was just it was so frickin' painful. Never had to take any tests, though. Never did any exams, which is why I love poli-sci. But this is another example of those things that we don't need. These are things that we don't need to have in our lives. A $500 word processor that's a glorified TRS-80.
If people are going to buy it, then they're going to buy it. And I can't figure out people anymore. I really can't. I try. I can't. It can be awfully frustrating at times. So speaking of things we don't need that are coming, I think this thing's going to die a slow death, which is a good thing. What are you hearing about virtual reality? We saw that bizarre picture
at the Mobile World Congress this past weekend with Mark Zuckerberg walking down the aisles. Like I said in the pre-show or earlier, arguably one of the richest guys in the world, arguably one of the most important people in the world, and no one knew he was in the room.
Right.
Because they all had these VR goggles on. That to me was a disturbing image. I know it's a bunch of press people. I know Sony put them out there for folks to do this with, but it was a weird, creepy photo. Do you think the average person wants VR?
Okay. Here's the thing. At some point in our lives, there is going to be VR.
Yes, I agree.
There's going to be. It's not going to be like we see it now. And VR is going to be in a way that we can't even imagine, like in 1995 of trying to imagine the iPhone.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't imagine how VR is going to be used. But in 100 years, when you're born, you could have some chip implanted, just like you have a vaccination or whatever.
Yep.
And you have VR in your head, in your eyes, or whatever these may be. We can't even fathom what that is going to look like. Mm-hmm. And in 1970, if you said, yeah, we're going to have these phones that you can tap on and just buy things and stuff comes over the air and, people would look at you like you were crazy. Then they'd send out Columbo to investigate you and everything, and I think that's kind of how I feel about VR. Is it inevitable? Yeah, it is. But the problem with future technology is that we try and envision future technology in our lives right now.
Yeah.
And our lives change so much to enable future technology. And it's just very difficult. And that was part of the genius of Steve Jobs, that he was able to envision something, further ahead than what most of us could. So, he could see a time when an iPhone would be a great thing. And maybe the rest of us couldn't.
I agree with you that this stuff is inevitable, but I also believe that a lot of this is, as Sherry said in the IRC chat room, VR is a new 3D. This is a lot of, I think, manufacturers trying to push us towards a technology that we didn't ask for. And that, frankly, unlike the iPhone, which is technology we didn't ask for, we didn't know we wanted, we know we don't want this. We know we don't want VR in our average everyday lives.
But we're saying we don't want it based on those big goggles and based on the way that our lives are now. And that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
When VR becomes a thing, and it will, it's not going to be the way that we see it now. We're not going to be wearing big goggles, and we're not going to be doing the things that we're doing now. It's going to be like augmented reality, VR, everything all in one. And, it's just going to be part of our lives. Our grandkids are going to look at this, or our great-grandkids are going to look at this and say, wow, how did you ever do without that?
Wayne in the Telegram room points out a terrifying future, which is probably going to happen. Coming soon to augmented reality near you, ads everywhere, pop-up superimposed on real life, retina and pupil dilation tracking to maximize marketing to you. That's going to happen. That is absolutely going to happen. I saw a great AR. I think AR is going to be more popular and more prevalent than VR, if only because it's going to be overlaid into our lives. But as I think Monty said, or Mosquito said, with regards, it'll be mostly vertical markets, mostly very, very tight niche kind of things. There was a great demonstration of AR for pilots for learning how to fly. And it was this really cool thing where the guy put on sort of like Google Glass type glasses and went out flying. And as he flew, superimposed over his view was places where he could fly, where he couldn't fly. He was flying in Los Angeles. And so the area in the Los Angeles airport where small planes aren't allowed was literally a column in the sky that he could see that he couldn't fly into. It was like a red column that he wasn't allowed to fly into, and he could see what altitudes he was allowed to fly into. And that kind of thing is really cool and really interesting, and that's going to be very targeted to certain markets. You'll see it with pilots, with engineers, with those kinds of folks. But for us consumers, the future that Wayne has envisioned is unfortunately going to be, I think, much more accurate and much more terrifying.
Well, I think a lot of things will change before any of that ever happens.
I would hope so. Folks, we're talking to Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. He has his own podcast, two of them even. One, the Dalrymple Report, and the other is Amplified. Listen to both on the iTunes Store. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Shawn.
Talk to you later. See you, buddy.
Bye.
What are your thoughts on any of these things, folks? Do you have concerns, thoughts about whether it be VR? Wayne, that was a good point. Something I've thought about before, too, is that this is the way it's going to go. This is the way we're going to end up with a lot of VR. What will happen is they'll offer it for free. You know, it'll be a monthly plan, and they'll offer it for free as long as you watch an ad. And so down here will be an ad for this. And then combined with all the other technology that we'll have available to us with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, you walk by a store and an ad will pop up. And the ad will be, if you come into our store right now, we'll give you 10% off an entree or 15% off sneakers, or I wouldn't wear those kinds of things. I don't want that kind of stuff. For specific markets, I can see it. I'd love to have VR or AR in a museum where as you walk towards a artwork, it would start describing the artwork for you. You could tell where it was from and who painted it and the style and where other artwork similar to it was, or where other artwork this artist had. That kind of stuff I can see being really useful. But yeah, Wayne has got the terrifying future right in our faces. In our starting point photography segment, I got a tweet from our good friend Captain Ron Klutz. He works for Google. Captain Ron. He says, Shawn, any suggestions for a photo editor on iOS and iPad mini? We've talked about this a few times on the show. And he's very specific. He's talking about editing photos on his iPad, on his iPhone. Now, whether he's taking them on that or not doesn't matter, but he wants to edit them on those devices. And there's all kinds of apps. I did a class this past Thursday, a week ago tomorrow, in downtown Vancouver about taking better pictures with the iPhone specifically. And before the class, I checked to see how many iPhone photo apps I have on my phone. I have 204. I have 204 photo apps, not apps, photo apps on my phone. I may have a problem. I may have a little bit of a problem when it comes to photo apps. I bet about half of them are paid, too. I have no problem paying 99 cents for a cool photo app, although I have cut back. 204 is a little much. My favorite ones are the ones we'll talk about here. One of the issues with editing photos on the iPhone in particular, especially depending on the size of the screen, is you really can't see much detail in a lot of the apps. You have to be kind of careful about editing, because I found when I was first doing this, I was really blowing out my edits. They were over the top. I would do the edits on the iPhone, and then when I went to look at them on on Twitter or on Facebook or where I posted it, I saw the effects were just really over the top and not what I was actually looking for. So that's something you have to keep in mind when you go ahead and start editing stuff on your smaller screen. I have less of an issue with it when it comes to, where'd my video go? Hello? Have I lost video? That's weird. I'm just frozen. You guys can still hear me, but my video is frozen. Well, that's just weird. Why has my video frozen? Okay, hang on a second. I think is it QuickTime? Let me go to the QuickTime and see if that did it. Do 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 do. Okay, hang on, folks. That's kind of funny. That's not I need to fix this because it's not an attractive face. I got my face is all messed up there. No, it's not going to work. That's funny. Okay, so it looks like what I'm going to do is just not show me on video for the rest of the show. Yikes. You change the logo. Yeah, it's I can't stop and start the video, Brian, because if I stop the Wirecast video, I'll lose the Google Hangout and YouTube video. No, Les, don't screenshot it. Don't be like that. Don't. You guys are so mean to me. Here I am having problems, and you guys are just being mean to me. Stop being mean. Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. Well, I don't know why it's doing that. I opened up. Now, I've done this before, so I don't know why opening up QuickTime this time around would have caused that issue. Okay. So let's see if I can't. It works there. So the one I use the most for real quick edits is an app called Snapseed. It's available from Google. It's free. It's available on Android devices. It's available on smartphones. It's available on the desktop, your browser. This is the one I use all the time. You simply click Open. You pick an image. And on the right-hand side, you see down here. Let me move that out of the way. You, come on. No, you won't go to the way. All right, fine. You see this little pencil icon down in the lower right. That pencil icon is where all the magic stuff happens. You tap on it, and then you start messing around with these buttons. And it doesn't matter what they mean. You don't have to know what tune image or details or crop or rotate, whatever that stuff means. Just tap on something and see what happens. So I tapped on tune image. You see at the bottom of the screen it says brightness. Just start dragging your finger left and right across your iPhone screen. And you'll see your image gets darker or brighter, depending on how you want it to go. So you find the brightness level you want. You can also double tap to zoom in on the image. Double tap to zoom out. So once you get your brightness set, then you scroll up and down, or you drag up and down, and you have all these other options. Ambiance. So you get ambiance, and you start scrolling back and forth on ambiance. So this works this way for every single one of these options. Healing brushes and transform, and you've got lens blur. Lens blur is kind of cool because you can just start screwing around, messing around with this. And all this stuff is being done just with your fingers dragging around the screen. Really easy to use. This is a really, really simple app to use. A lot of fun to do that one. So, oops. Turn it sideways. So that's Snapseed, and that's free. So the other suggestion I had for Ron was Pixelmator. Pixelmator is not free. I think it's $5 on the iTunes store, on the App Store. It can do a bunch of stuff very similar to that stuff that, let me go to Photos and Favorites and this picture. You can do a lot of stuff very similar to Snapseed. You can drag and drop, use your fingers to zoom in and zoom out. You've got a bunch of options up here. Oops, that's the wrong one. Hang on. No. Go away. Where's the cancel button? There we go. You have the paint can up here. Here's where you can get to your retouching stuff. So here's a repair button. So you can lighten, darken, clone, sharpen, soften, smudge. And again, all these things are just drag and drop type stuff. Drag your finger across the screen and stuff happens. So I encourage you to just play around with these things. You don't need to know what this stuff does. All these apps are real simple to use. They're really easy to just touch on the screen and play around with them to see what they do. So give that one a try. I think so. Someone find out for me. Go to Pixelmator on the iTunes store, and someone tell me how much Pixelmator costs. And they've got a desktop version of it, and they've also got a iOS version of it. I think But wait for it to be on sale, because it's often on sale. One of the problems I have with Pixelmator is their stuff goes on sale like on a regular basis. And they sort of hurt themselves because of that. The app will be $30 on the desktop one day, and then it'll drop to $15. So wait for a sale before you buy it. And lastly is Lightroom. Lightroom is the granddaddy, not granddaddy, sorry, is the big powerful version of photo editing apps. Monty tells me that Pixelmator is $5. Buy it. It's a no-brainer. Buy Pixelmator. If you want to send me an email, I'll send you the URL, and you can then click on it, and I get a kickback. But don't worry about it. It's $5. Just do it. What I always tell folks, people ask in my classes all the time, what's the difference between Photoshop and Lightroom? Photoshop is a pixel editor. Lightroom is a photo editor. That's the big difference. Photoshop is also the single most complicated program you're going to ever use. Unless you're Maurice Chevalier in the scientific field, Photoshop is insanely complicated and not strictly necessary for the average everyday photo editor. You can do some great stuff in Lightroom. If you're comfortable in Photoshop, by all means, use Photoshop. You can do some amazing things in Photoshop. But for me, I don't use Photoshop. I use Lightroom. And Adobe has a Lightroom client that works very similar to what happens on the desktop. Not completely, obviously, because your iPhone just can't do as much as what as what happens on the desktop. Mosquito says, if I could find a way to really rely entirely upon something like Pixelmator without sacrificing certain Photoshop features, I'd happily pay full price. That's true. There's no app out there that does as much as Photoshop. There are apps that get you close. Adobe Photoshop Elements gets about 75% of it. Pixelmator gets 80%, depending on what you use and how you use it. But nothing is as good as Photoshop if you need all the power of Photoshop. Personally, I don't. So using Photoshop Lightroom is very similar to using it on the desktop, though obviously everything's been scrunched down for... there's that picture of Vancouver I was looking for. Remember I was telling you earlier about Vancouver? I was talking about the mountains of Seattle. Well, there's Vancouver. There's the city down there, and there's the mountains. And you can ski these mountains. You can take a city bus and get to these mountains. So let's see if I can't do some edits on... So you have the usual commands, the crop command, the preset command. You can make these things black and white just by tapping on the screen. You can let me go back, undo. You can see all the usual adjustments, and you can do white balance adjustments, temperature adjustments, auto tone it, exposure adjustments, contrast, highlights, all these kind of things. And again, these are things you don't actually need to know what they mean. Just tap on them and start scrolling around the screen and seeing whether the results are things that you want. Most of these photo editors are really, really easy to use on iOS because iOS, by its nature, these things have to be simple. They can't be complicated because the interface that you're using on iOS doesn't allow for complicated. The interface on your desktop allows for keyboard commands and control, alt, delete kind of stuff and a mouse and tablets. But when it comes to iOS, you have a small screen size relative to a desktop, and you have a touch-based interface. So don't be intimidated by iOS apps. There's free ones, there's great free ones out there. There's great paid ones out there. Try them. Download them. Play around with them. I love, one of the reasons why I've got 200 of these freaking apps is because I'll be in an airport or on the bus or at Starbucks, and I'll just open up one of these apps and one of these images and just start messing around with it. It's really easy to do. Like I've often said, every single shot I take has to get post-processed in some way, shape, or form. It's real simple. There's right on the camera app itself, you can see that there is a bunch of things you can, what the hell? Oh. A bunch of edit things you can do right from the phone. Here at the bottom of the screen, you can see the crop. You can change filters. You can change the light, the color, the black and white. There's a bunch of things you can do on the phone natively. But then there's a bunch of apps that can do even more. The video didn't fix itself. It's really weird because my that look is just hilarious. I got to stop. Different image up there. I don't know why this thing has decided to crap out of me like that. Because my light for my camera is still on, as if the camera was still working. Anyway, let's get to some emails. As always, I love getting emails from you guys. Send me emails anytime you'd like to Shawn at yourmaclifeshow.com. Or if you'd like, you can send them directly to the show at onair at yourmaclifeshow.com. Let me get to emails. Jason Painter says, did you hear the groundswell of iPad Pro users upset that general interface control using the pencil had been removed from a beta? Well, I'm happy that it's going to be restored because I've got a pencil and I'm not really artistic. I found it's very pleasant to use in a few circumstances. When I play a word game like a crossword, it's nice to tap with. I play an arcade game called Shooty Skies, and I found it so much better with the pencil because you have to move across the screen constantly and a finger gets sweaty and sticks. There are valid uses for the pencil other than drawing. Okay, it was a bit whiny of the iPad Pro community, but don't you think it's interesting how Apple has changed their ideas on this? It's possible that they were going to anyway, but I suspect they wanted to keep pencil support to drawing only. It would have greatly affected my own usage. See, I disagree with this idea that Wayne, I think, Wayne, were you talking to me when you said, do you bother keeping mental track of which app does what? When you're talking about iOS apps? Yeah, for the most part. I know big picture what each app does. I know which ones do text. I know which ones do the kind of effects I want. I know which ones do posting to different places in ways that I want it to. I know big picture wise. So yeah, I do keep track of them. If only because I'm using them. I'm using a lot of them all the time. I don't think Apple did this because they didn't want you to use the pencil as a stylus, as some people have said. They keep throwing that Steve Jobs line out there. If you see a stylus, they've done it wrong. You know, times change. People move on. I think Apple removed it for valid reasons, and we're always going to put it back. Maybe that particular action was interfering with something. It's very funny how this community jumps to conclusions. And they always jump to a different conclusion rather than one that is more simple. It's a lot simpler to think Apple took this out because it's a beta, and you take things and take things out of beta, put things into beta for any number of reasons. Now, if Apple had released this version of the OS, of iOS, without this functionality, then I'd be upset. But it was only in a beta. So don't make it sound like, oh, because we raised a stink, Apple changed this. We don't know that. You're jumping to a conclusion where there's no facts or evidence available. So, yeah, I'm not... Brian Moreau, the quote was, if you see a stylus, they blew it from Steve Jobs. Yeah, exactly. But that's not true anymore. Because if you want to throw that quote out there, then you shouldn't be able to figure out why Apple's made the pencil. Because the pencil is a stylus. Yes, it's a drawing tool, but it's also a stylus. So, anyway. April Canton says, I have an OWC external drive connected via FireWire cable. Can I just pull the plug on it while the iMac is live and attach it to my laptop via the USB cable they supplied? Or do I have to shut down the iMac? Is FireWire tolerant of cutting power the way USB is? Well, honestly, neither of them are tolerant of cutting power. And you should never just pull the plug on any electronic device without not shutting it down, but at least dismounting it from your desktop. When you've got a drive connected via FireWire or USB, data is going back and forth. Sometimes in the background. Sometimes you don't know what's happening. And you have a danger. Back in the early days of USB, your computer would freak out if you pulled the plug on a USB device that hadn't been properly unmounted. It's less of an issue now, but I still wouldn't trust it, especially with powered devices. That means if they're a powered by cable device, electricity is going back and forth there. It's just easier to unplug it. Now, interestingly enough, we don't have to do that with our iPhones anymore. You can unplug your iPhone from your USB cable, your Lightning cable, anytime you want without having to unmount it. But I always try to remember to unmount USB and FireWire drives. Monty says, never disconnect a drive from your Mac without ejecting it first, unless you just don't care about your data. Yeah, exactly. Why take the chance? You're taking a chance of corrupting at least some data, if not the entire machine. Mosquito says, I had a real anger management moment with a freelancer at my last day job who yanked her drive's FireWire cable out of a computer without ejecting it first. I lost my shit. I don't know if I'd go that far, but... Jason Painter in Australia says, as a non-American who didn't really know about the attack, I have the advantage of a more dispassionate response to the issue of Apple versus FBI. I am very concerned that if Apple loses this fight, it will also affect me. I'm not hiding something, but like you say, that's no reason to give up privacy. What if some enemy planted some incendiary material in your account, even by simple means such as borrowing your phone? You could be had up for it if you had no privacy. What a tool for anyone trying to destroy someone. I hope it goes our way. Got an email from Veronica Hartman. She says, I went looking for nifty 50 lenses at London Drugs, and there are actually two that I can buy. They're two different prices, $129 or $169 for the same lens. The price difference is because one is a stabilizer lens and the cheaper one is not. So, what would you recommend? If I can comfortably use the unstabilized lens, I'd buy that one. I value your opinion when it comes to us beginner photographers and trust your recommendations. The only issue here, Veronica, is stabilizing versus unstabilizing. And it comes down to what kind of pictures you're going to take with that lens. If you are going to be doing mostly, it's a nifty 50, so it's going to be a 1.8 f-stop, a good low light lens. If you're shooting a lot in low light, you might want to go with the stabilized lens. Because low light, remember we've talked about this before, any motion of the camera is death to focus. And the lower the light, the less motion it takes for the camera to have blur. So you want as much tools as you can to prevent that blur, and stabilizing is one of those tools. But if you're using the Nifty 50 in normal light conditions, outside in the daytime, a cloudy, or even in a well-lit room, if that's the kind of stuff you're going to go for mostly, then buy the unstabilized one. The other issue, too, depending on how comfortable you are with this stuff, you can get, if you find you're taking, if you say you buy the unstabilized lens, and you're taking shots that are blurry in low light, bump your ISO up. That'll help you gather more light. For the most part, as a beginner, I'd say go with the unstabilized lens and then just learn how to take better pictures with it. Save yourself the money that you can spend on other things and in other places. Trying to find out which one of these is. Where's this? Tony, what's his name? Tony Methkowski. Sorry, Tony, I'm saying your name wrong. What are some tips for capturing intimate portraits of fast-moving dogs and cats? Sorry, Tony. The problem is that's contradictory. Intimate portraits, and Monty is trying to be rude by putting intimate in quotes. Stop that. Intimate portraits implies up close, really filling the frame full of images, full of the image of the person or the cat or the dog or whatever it might be. That being the case, then you can't capture fast motion. And flipping it around, fast motion generally isn't intimate. I don't know if it's your description or if it's your understanding of what you're trying to get. Basically, if it's an intimate shot, your setting should be an f-stop of at least 8, if not lower, and a shutter speed of at least 250. 250 of a second, and we're assuming in good light. If you're going after things that are moving quickly, dogs and cats running around, living together, you want a higher shutter speed, so go for a shutter speed of at least 1/500th or 1/1000th, and a wider aperture a smaller aperture of, say, f11 or higher than that. Tony, if you're listening in, send me an email to clarify that, because like I said, you're asking about two completely different and separate things, and I may not be getting it exactly the way you are trying to describe it. Les Posen in Australia sends me this email today, apparently. He says, Prime Minister of Malaysia wants Apple research facility in the country. Well, that's good. Except also, Malaysia staunchly opposes LGBTQ rights. Guess what, Malaysia? You ain't getting an Apple research facility. Guarantee you. Les also says they've been using VR for clinical psychology since 2001, but the future will be riled by mixed VR and AR. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. The future is definitely of AR. We're definitely going to have versions of AR and VR in the future. How far away is that future? A lot of folks think it's going to be 5 years. I disagree. VR, the way it's presently constituted now, we will not have in 5 years. Again, as Mosquito says, in vertical markets, engineering, maybe medicine, manufacturing, construction, those kind of markets will have it. But for average everyday people, for example, will you be sitting in 5 years, will you be sitting around your house, rather than looking at a 50-inch big screen TV, will you and your family be sitting around watching virtual reality, wearing virtual reality goggles? I don't think so. I don't think the average person is going to be doing that. As Sherry said, it feels like VR right now is 3D. The average consumer didn't want 3D. The market wanted us to buy 3D, but we had no interest in it. So, interesting. Folks, that's it. I don't know what happened to my video, but it's not a bad thing. I mean, you didn't stare at my face for the last half hour of the show. So, win-win. I want to say thanks very much, as always, to our good friend Jim Dalrymple of The Loop at loopinsight.com. Thanks to you guys for being tuned into the show, especially you folks who are helping me test out the new, Sherry just posted in Telegram. Screw you, Sherry. For you folks who helped me test out Telegram, thanks very much. We're going to play around more with Telegram on next week's show and see if we can't get some more integration into it. I'm going to keep the Telegram window open all week. So if you want to get in touch with me, just go to telegram.org or send me an email, and I'll give you the information on how to hook up to Telegram. We can chat during the week. As always, I've been Shawn King. Thank you guys very much for being tuned in, and this has been your Mac Life. See ya!